Hi everyone, I'm Zara, and 6 months ago, my sister Tessa thought it would be hilarious to post my before and after weight loss photos on her Instagram story with the caption, "When you're still not skinny enough for family photos, LOL." She tagged our entire extended family, her boyfriend Kyle, and about 300 of her closest followers. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly documenting her own transformation for months, not her glow-up. Her breakdown, and when stellar models and talent called her for that dream casting she'd been chasing for 2 years. Well, let's just say I made sure they had the complete picture. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tuesday mornings at Iron Peak Fitness were supposed to be my sanctuary. 6 a.m., barely any crowd. Just me and the familiar rhythm of weights hitting the rack. I'd been consistent for 8 months, transforming not just my body but my entire relationship with myself. Down 43 pounds, stronger than I'd ever been, finally comfortable in clothes that actually fit instead of hiding behind oversized hoodies. Coach Riley had started using me as motivation for her other clients, and honestly, I was proud of the work I'd put in. That particular Tuesday started like any other. I finished my deadlift set, grabbed my water bottle, and checked my phone during rest. That's when I saw 17 notifications from Instagram, 12 missed calls from Nina, and a text from my coworker Marcus that just said, "Yo, what the hell is this?" My hands were still shaky from the workout, but they started trembling for an entirely different reason when I opened Instagram. There it was, on Tessa's story, viewed by 412 people and counting. My before photo from 8 months ago, the one I'd taken in our shared bathroom mirror when I'd finally decided to commit to changing my life. I remembered that day clearly because I'd cried after taking it, overwhelmed by how disconnected I felt from my own reflection. Next to it was a photo from last weekend's family barbecue, me in a fitted sundress that actually showed my waist for the first time in years. I thought I looked good. I thought I looked confident. But Tessa had added her own commentary in bright pink text overlay. "Zara's glow-up attempt, bless her heart, still working on it. Some of us are just naturally blessed, I guess." The worst part wasn't even the caption. It was the laughing emoji reactions from people I'd grown up with. Kyle Harrison, her boyfriend, had responded with 3 crying laughing faces. My cousin Derek had screenshotted and reposted it to his own story with family roast sessions, hit different. Even worse, my own mother had seen it. Carol Blackwell had liked the story. Actually liked it. I sat there on the gym bench, sweat cooling on my skin, staring at my phone screen like it had just delivered the worst news of my life. In a way, it had. This wasn't sibling teasing. This wasn't playful family banter, this was deliberate humiliation, broadcast to everyone we knew, designed to make sure that no matter how much progress I made, I'd always be the before picture in Tessa's narrative. Nina called while I was still processing. She didn't even wait for me to say hello. "Zara, please tell me you've seen what your psychotic sister just posted." "I'm looking at it right now," I managed, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "This is beyond messed up, like genuinely cruel. Have you talked to your parents about this?" I almost laughed, but it came out more like a choke. "My mom liked the post, Nina." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, "Jesus Christ." The thing is, this wasn't new behavior from Tessa. It was just the first time she'd made it this public. Growing up, she was always the pretty one, the one who got modeling inquiries at the mall, the one boys called instead of texted, because they wanted to hear her voice. I was the smart one, which in my family was basically code for the consolation prize. When I got accepted to Portland State with a scholarship, Tessa got a car for her 16th birthday the same week, because Mom said she needed something to celebrate too. But this felt different. This felt like she was threatened by something. Maybe it was the confidence I'd been building. Maybe it was the way I'd started speaking up at family dinners instead of just nodding along. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in our lives, I was getting attention for something positive. And she couldn't stand it. I drove home from the gym in complete silence, my mind racing between humiliation and something else. Something that felt dangerous, and unfamiliar. When I walked into our shared apartment, Tessa was in the kitchen making her usual breakfast smoothie, completely unbothered. "Morning's in," she said without looking up from her phone. "Good workout?" I stood there for a moment, studying her. Tessa was still beautiful, still the kind of person who looked effortlessly put together even in yesterday's mascara and an oversized t-shirt. But there were things I'd been noticing lately. The way her jeans had been fitting tighter around her hips, the way she'd started wearing looser tops, the delivery bags that appeared more frequently on our counter, the wine bottles that disappeared from our fridge faster than they used to. "Tessa," I said carefully, "we need to talk about what you posted this morning." She glanced up then, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt exactly, but awareness. She knew exactly what I was referring to, which meant it had been intentional. "Oh, that," she shrugged, returning to her phone. "It was just funny. You're being way too sensitive about it." "Funny to who? You tagged our entire family. You made me look like a joke." "You're not a joke, Zara. You're just still working on yourself. There's nothing wrong with that." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. The way she said it, like she was being generous. Like I should be grateful for her acknowledgement that I wasn't completely hopeless. "Take it down," I said. "It's already been up for like 3 hours. Taking it down now would just make it look like you can't take a joke." "I'm not joking, Tessa. Take it down." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes when she looked at me. She was sizing me up, calculating whether I was actually a threat now or still the same pushover sister she'd always known. "No," she said finally. "It's already out there. Besides, it might motivate you to keep working harder." That's when it hit. This wasn't about motivation or tough love or even simple sibling rivalry. This was about control. This was about making sure that no matter how much I changed, how much I grew, how much stronger I became, she would always have the power to reduce me to the before picture. She would always be able to make me feel small. I went to my room and closed the door. Then I did something I'd never done before in my life. I started planning. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it, Document. Then I started scrolling through Tessa's social media, not just from the past week or month, but from the past 6 months. I screenshot everything. The photos where she'd clearly edited her waist. The captions where she complained about bloating but blamed it on her period. The tagged photos from friends where she looked noticeably different than in her own posts. But I didn't stop there. I went through our shared Google Photos account, the one we'd created years ago for family pictures. I found the recent photos she'd asked me to delete, the ones from Kyle's birthday party, where her dress didn't fit quite right. The candid shots from our cousin's wedding, where you could see the real shape of her face, not the contoured and filtered version she posted. I organized everything chronologically. I noted dates, contexts, pattern. I wasn't doing this out of spite. Not yet. I was doing it because for the first time in my life I needed to see the full picture of who my sister really was when she wasn't performing. What I found was fascinating. Tessa had gained at least 20 pounds in the past 6 months, maybe more. It was subtle because she was good at hiding it, good at angles and editing and strategic outfit choices. But it was there. More than that, I could see the timeline of when it started, right around the time I'd begun my own transformation. While I was learning to meal prep and finding my rhythm at the gym, she'd started ordering DoorDash almost daily. While I was building healthy habits, she was staying out later, drinking more, eating her feelings in ways that she'd spent years judging other people. It was like watching someone slowly sabotage themselves, and I realized with startling clarity that my success had triggered something in her that she couldn't control. The documentation took me 3 hours. By the time I was finished, I had a comprehensive timeline of Tessa's transformation, and it wasn't the kind she'd want the world to see. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. I wasn't even sure I would use it. I just needed to know that I had it. That for once in our relationship, I held cards she didn't know about. That evening, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message while staring at my computer screen. Hi honey, I saw Tessa's post today. I know she was just having fun, but maybe you two should talk about being more supportive of each other's journeys. You've been doing so well with your health goals, and I'm proud of you for sticking with it. Love you. I played the message 3 times, analyzing every word. She was proud of me for sticking with it, but she'd liked the post that mocked my progress. She wanted us to be more supportive of each other, but she hadn't told Tessa to take it down. Everything about it was perfectly calculated to make me feel like I was overreacting while avoiding any real accountability. That night, I lay in bed, listening to Tessa's voice through the thin walls of our apartment. She was on a video call with someone, probably Kyle, laughing about something. I could hear fragments of the conversation. Something about a casting call, something about new headshots, something about how this could finally be her big break. I realized then that I'd been thinking about this all wrong. This wasn't just about one humiliating post. This was about a pattern of behavior that had been going on for years, and I'd been too focused on trying to earn their love to see it clearly. Tessa didn't post that picture because she was threatened by my progress. She posted it because she genuinely believed she had the right to use my vulnerabilities for her entertainment, and she believed there would be no consequences. She was wrong about the consequences part. I opened my laptop one more time and created another folder. This one I titled Stellar Model. Then I went to their website and started reading about their values, about their commitment to authentic representation, about their social media guidelines for talent, about how they prided themselves on working with influencers who embodied body positivity and genuine wellness. I read until my eyes burned, taking notes, learning the language they used, understanding what they valued, and what they absolutely wouldn't tolerate. By the time I closed the laptop, I had a plan. Not a revenge fantasy, not an emotional outburst, but a carefully constructed strategy that would use Tessa's own methods against her. She wanted to play games with public humiliation. Fine. But this time, the rules were going to be different. This time, I wasn't going to be the punchline. This time, I was going to be the one holding the camera. The last thing I did before falling asleep was text Nina, "I need your help with something. Can you meet me tomorrow after work?" Her response came back immediately. "Whatever you need, it's about time." I smiled in the darkness of my room. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had agency. I felt like I had power. And more importantly, I felt like I had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something new. Tomorrow I would stop being the victim of Tessa's narrative and start writing my own story. And if she didn't like how it ended, well, she should have thought about that before she decided to make me the punchline of hers. Nina met me at Grind Coffee the next evening, sliding into the corner booth with 2 large cappuccinos and the kind of determined expression that meant she was ready for war. I'd texted her the basics, but seeing her face when I explained the full scope of what Tessa had done made me realize just how far outside normal sibling behavior this really was. "Show me everything," she said, pulling out her laptop. I opened my phone and walked her through the Instagram story, the comments, the family reactions. Nina's jaw got tighter with each screenshot. When I got to the part about Mom liking the post, she actually said, "What the hell?" out loud, causing the barista to glance over. "Okay," Nina said, closing her laptop with a decisive snap. "What's the plan? Because there has to be a plan. You didn't ask me here just to vent." I hesitated for a moment, then pulled out my own laptop. "I need to show you something, but I need you to promise me you won't think I'm crazy. Zara, after what she did to you, I'm pretty sure anything you're planning is justified." I opened the documentation folder and turned the screen toward her. Nina leaned forward, squinting at the timeline I'd created. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked almost like awe. "Holy shit," she whispered. "How long did this take you?" "About 3 hours. But Nina, look at the dates. Look at the pattern." She scrolled through the screenshots, the saved photos, the carefully organized timeline of Tessa's transformation. I watched her face as she began to see what I'd seen, the gradual weight gain that coincided perfectly with my weight loss, the increasingly frequent editing phase, the way Tessa's behavior had become more aggressive and public right around the time I'd started getting compliments on my progress. "She's been spiraling," Nina said quietly, "like actually spiraling, and taking it out on you. There's more." I clicked to another folder. I found something else. What I'd discovered after Nina left the night before was a digital paper trail that painted an even clearer picture of Tessa's current state of mind. Her credit card statements, which she'd foolishly shared access to when we'd split expenses for Mom's birthday gift last month. Her Venmo transactions, all public by default because she was the type of person who wanted everyone to see her buying drinks for friends at trendy bars. The numbers told a story that her Instagram definitely didn't. $300 at Sephora in a single shopping trip, trying to buy her way back to confidence. Frequent charges at high-end restaurants, always with Kyle, always expensive enough to suggest she was compensating for something. But the most telling detail was the pattern of late-night food delivery orders, always on nights when she'd posted particularly polished photos of herself looking effortlessly perfect. "Jesus, Zara. She's spending like someone who's completely out of control." "Look at this," I said, clicking to show her Tessa's recent Amazon orders. Weight loss supplements that promised quick fixes, waist trainers that claimed to instantly sculpt your silhouette, expensive workout clothes that had never left their packages, based on the reviews she'd left complaining about sizing issues. Nina sat back in her chair processing. "She's actually jealous of you, like genuinely, deeply jealous." "That's what I think too, but there's something else." I pulled up the Stellar Models website on my laptop. "You know how she's been talking about this modeling agency for months, how this is supposed to be her big break?" "Yeah, she's been posting about it constantly, something about a casting call for their new campaign." While I did some research, I clicked through to their talent page, showing Nina the current models they represented. All of them were conventionally beautiful, but they weren't just pretty faces. Their Instagram feeds showcased genuine fitness journeys, authentic lifestyle content, and what the agency called aspirational wellness. These weren't people who posted edited selfies and called it body positivity. These were people who documented real workouts, real meal prep, real struggles and victories. "They have very specific standards," I continued, scrolling through their model guidelines, "not just about appearance, but about authenticity. They specifically mention that they review potential talents' social media presence for evidence of genuine wellness practices versus performative health content." Nina was starting to smile, and it wasn't a nice smile. "And your sister's feed is full of performative bullshit." "Exactly. But more than that, I have documentation of what her actual lifestyle looks like, versus what she posts, and I have photos that show the real timeline of her physical changes." I opened another folder, this one containing side-by-side comparisons I'd created the night before. Tessa's edited Instagram posts next to unfiltered photos from the same time periods. Her captions about morning workouts next to timestamps showing she was actually ordering breakfast delivery. Her posts about healthy meal prep next to credit card charges for fast food. Nina paused, looking at me with something that might have been pride. "This is actually brilliant. You're not just fighting back, you're fighting smart." "I'm not fighting at all yet," I said. "I'm just gathering information. I don't even know if I'm gonna use any of this." Nina raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks to me like you've already decided." She wasn't wrong. Something had shifted in me since yesterday morning, something fundamental about how I saw myself in relation to my family, my sister, the world in general. For years I'd accepted their version of me as the awkward one, the one who needed to be grateful for whatever scraps of affection they threw my way. But building this documentation had shown me something else. It had shown me that I was actually the one with the clearer perspective, the better judgment, the stronger work ethic. "There's one more thing," I said, clicking to a final folder. I found her application materials for Stellar Models. Nina's eyes widened. "How?" "She left her email open on my laptop last week when she was updating her portfolio. I wasn't snooping, I just saw it in her recently sent items." This was technically true, though I'd definitely done some additional investigating once I'd seen the initial email thread. She submitted her application 3 days ago. The casting call is next week. I showed Nina the email thread between Tessa and Marcus Sterling, the talent coordinator at Stellar Models. He'd been impressed by her initial portfolio, complimenting her look and her social media following. But there was something in his tone that suggested this wasn't a done deal yet. References to a final review process and comprehensive background assessment that would happen before any offers were made. They're going to deep dive her social media, Nina said, understanding immediately. They're going to look at everything, probably, but right now, all they're seeing is her curated feed, the version of herself that she wants them to see, which is a complete lie, I agreed. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us staring at the laptop screen. I could feel Nina watching me, waiting to see what I would do with all this information. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure yet. Part of me wanted to close the laptop, delete all the folders and try to move on. But a bigger part of me was tired of being the collateral damage in Tessa's pursuit of external validation. Can I ask you something? Nina said eventually, when she posted that story yesterday. How did it make you feel? Like really feel, not just the obvious stuff about being humiliated. I thought about it, trying to articulate something I'd been struggling to put into words. It made me feel like nothing I do will ever matter, like I could transform my entire life, become the person I've always wanted to be, and she'd still find a way to make me feel small, like my progress only exists to be her punchline. That's fucked up, Zara. That's actually psychologically abusive. I know, I think I've always known, but I told myself it was just sister stuff, normal family dynamic. There's nothing normal about deliberately sabotaging someone's confidence when they're trying to improve their life. Nina was right, and hearing her say it out loud made something crystallize in my mind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about getting back at Tessa for being mean to me. This was about refusing to let her continue using my vulnerabilities as entertainment while hiding her own struggles behind a carefully constructed facade. What if, I said slowly, I didn't do anything malicious? What if I just made sure that Stellar Models had access to the same information that anyone could find if they looked hard enough? You mean like a concerned citizen providing context? Exactly. I wouldn't be making anything up or exposing private information. I'd just be organizing publicly available information in a way that shows the full picture of who she really is. Nina grinned. That's diabolical. And completely ethical. You think, Zara, she humiliated you publicly, using photos you trusted her with, to an audience that includes your entire family and professional network. She did it deliberately, to hurt you at a moment when you should have been celebrating your progress. And when you asked her to take it down, she refused. Nina leaned forward, her voice getting more intense. You don't owe her protection from the consequences of her own behavior. That night, I went home to find Tessa in the living room, FaceTiming with Kyle. She had her laptop open, and I could see she was scrolling through modeling portfolios, probably comparing herself to other women who might be competing for the same opportunities. Oh hey Za, she said when she saw me, barely glancing up from the screen. Kyle, say hi to my sister. Kyle's face appeared on the screen, giving me a little wave. This was the same Kyle who'd laughed at my transformation photos just yesterday, but now he was acting like nothing had happened. Hey Zara, how's the fitness journey going? He asked, and I could hear the subtle mockery in his tone. It's going really well, thanks, I said evenly. How's everything with you? Can't complain, just here supporting my girl's modeling dreams. She's going to crush this Stellar Models thing. I smiled and nodded, then excused myself to my room. But as I closed my door, I heard Tessa's voice drifting through the walls. She's been so weird lately, she was saying to Kyle. Like ever since she lost some weight, she thinks she's hot shit or something. It's actually kind of sad. Maybe she just needs more time to adjust. Kyle replied, but he was laughing as he said it. I mean, good for her for trying, but let's be real. Some people are just naturally beautiful, And some people have to work really hard just to be average. I was trying to motivate her with that post. You know? Like, keep working. You're getting there. I stood frozen by my door, listening to my sister explain to her boyfriend how my public humiliation had actually been an act of kindness, how my hurt feelings were really just evidence of my inability to handle constructive criticism, how my progress was cute, but ultimately inadequate, compared to her natural gifts. That's when I made my decision. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email, not to Tessa, not to my parents, not to anyone in my family, to Marcus Sterling at Stellar Models. The subject line read, "Additional context for Tessa Blackwell application." I wrote it carefully, professionally, like the marketing coordinator I was. I explained that I was writing as someone who knew Miss Blackwell personally, and felt that the agency should have access to a more complete picture of her social media presence and lifestyle choices before making their final decision. I mentioned that I'd noticed some discrepancies between her public image and her actual practices that might be relevant to their evaluation process. I attached 3 files. The first was a professionally formatted document showing side-by-side comparisons of Tessa's edited posts versus unfiltered photos from the same time periods. The second was a timeline of her social media claims about fitness and wellness versus documented evidence of her actual lifestyle choices. The third was a collection of screenshots showing her recent pattern of publicly mocking body transformation journeys, including her post about me. I wrote that I understood the agency valued authenticity and genuine wellness advocacy in their talent, and I thought they should be aware that Ms. Blackwell's online presence might not accurately represent her actual values or lifestyle. I mentioned that as someone in the marketing industry, I felt obligated to ensure that brands I respected had access to complete information when making partnership decisions. I read the email 3 times, checking for anything that could be construed as vindictive or unprofessional. Everything I'd included was either publicly available information or reasonable interpretation of documented evidence. I wasn't making personal attacks or sharing private details. I was simply providing context that any thorough background check would eventually uncover anyway. The cursor hovered over the send button for a long time. Once I clicked it, there would be no taking it back. Tessa's dream opportunity would be evaluated, not just on her carefully curated image, but on the full reality of who she was and how she treated other people. I thought about the girl in my before photo, the one who'd cried after seeing her reflection in the bathroom mirror. I thought about all the progress I'd made, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I thought about the confidence I'd built, the strength I'd discovered, the person I'd become. Then I thought about Tessa's voice through the wall, explaining to Kyle how my public humiliation had been a favor to me. I clicked send. The email disappeared from my outbox, and I closed the laptop. I felt surprisingly calm, like I'd just completed a task that had been weighing on me for months. This wasn't about revenge or spite or getting back at my sister for being cruel. This was about refusing to let her weaponize my vulnerabilities while hiding behind a false image of perfection. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen to protect myself instead of protecting someone else's feelings, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I went to bed that night, listening to Tessa's voice through the walls, still talking excitedly about her upcoming casting call, still convinced that her natural advantages would carry her through any evaluation process. She had no idea that the rules of the game had just changed. She had no idea that this time, someone was watching her as carefully as she'd been watching me. She had no idea that the full picture of who she really was would soon be as public as she'd made my vulnerabilities. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep smiling. The response from Marcus Sterling came faster than I'd expected. Wednesday morning, while I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Additional context for Tessa Blackwell application, follow-up question." My heart hammered as I opened it. Marcus had written a brief but professional response thanking me for bringing the discrepancies to their attention. He mentioned that Stellar Models took authenticity very seriously, and that they would be conducting a more thorough review of Blackwell's application materials. He also asked if I would be available for a brief phone conversation that afternoon to discuss some of the documentation I'd provided. I stared at the email for a full minute, realizing that I'd just set something in motion that was much bigger than I'd initially planned. This wasn't just about providing information anymore, they were taking it seriously enough to want to interview me about it. I texted Nina immediately. "They want to talk to me on the phone today. This is actually happening." Her response came back within seconds. "Holy shit. Are you ready for this?" Was I ready? I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same mirror where I'd taken that before photo 8 months ago. The person looking back at me now was someone I barely recognized. Not just physically, but in terms of presence and confidence. The old Zara would have panicked, would have found a way to back out, would have convinced herself that she was being vindictive and cruel, but this Zara understood something the old one hadn't. Sometimes protecting yourself requires taking action that feels uncomfortable. I replied to Marcus, confirming that I was available for a call at 2 p.m., and then I went to work. The morning dragged by in a haze of distraction. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Tessa to text me about something, but there was nothing. She had no idea what was happening behind the scenes of her perfect life, no clue that her carefully constructed image was being scrutinized by the very people she was trying to impress. During my lunch break, I walked to the small park across from my office building and called Nina. "I keep going back and forth on whether I'm doing the right thing," I admitted, settling onto a bench under a maple tree. "Zara, let me ask you something. If the situation were reversed, if you had applied to represent some company and they found out you'd been publicly humiliating your sister's weight loss journey, would you expect them to just ignore that information?" I considered this. No, I guess not. I'd expect them to factor it into their decision about whether I represented their values. Exactly. You're not sabotaging her. You're providing context about her character and authenticity. If that ruins her chances, it's because her behavior doesn't align with what they're looking for, not because you're being malicious. Nina was right, but that didn't stop the knot of anxiety in my stomach from tightening as 2 o'clock approached. I found a quiet conference room at work and dialed Marcus Sterling's number exactly on time. "Zara, thank you for making time to speak with me," he said, his voice warm but professional. "I have to say, the documentation you provided was quite thorough. It's clear you put considerable thought into organizing this information." "I work in marketing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I understand the importance of having complete information when making brand partnership decisions." "Absolutely. And that's actually why I wanted to speak with you directly. Some of the discrepancies you've highlighted are significant enough that we need to understand the context better." He paused and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Can you walk me through your relationship to Miss Blackwell and what prompted you to reach out to us?" I took a deep breath and told him the truth. About growing up as Tessa's sister, about my weight loss journey, about the Instagram post that had humiliated me publicly, and about discovering the gap between her online persona and her actual lifestyle. I was careful to stick to facts rather than emotions, presenting everything as objectively as possible. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines or specific incidents. When I finished, there was a long pause. "I appreciate your honesty," he said finally. "The incident you described with the Instagram post is particularly concerning to us. Our brand is built around authentic wellness and supportive community building. Someone who publicly mocks others' fitness journeys, especially family members, would be fundamentally incompatible with our values." "I understand," I said, though part of me was starting to feel the weight of what I'd set in motion. "The other documentation you provided about the inconsistencies between her posted content and her actual lifestyle is also relevant. We represent people who are genuine advocates for the wellness industry, not performers who are just playing a role for social media." Marcus explained that they would be conducting what he called a comprehensive authenticity review of Tessa's application, which would include analyzing her social media patterns, cross-referencing her claims with available evidence, and evaluating whether her public behavior aligned with Stellar Model's brand values. "This type of review is actually standard for all our potential talent," he assured me. "Your information just gave us specific areas to focus on. In most cases, people who misrepresent themselves in their applications don't make it through our process anyway. You may have simply accelerated the timeline." After I hung up, I sat in the empty conference room for several minutes, processing what had just happened. There was no going back now. By tomorrow, possibly sooner, Tessa would know that her dream opportunity was slipping away. She might never know that I was involved, but she would definitely know that someone had been watching her closely enough to expose the gaps in her carefully crafted image. I returned to my desk and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering to how this would all play out. Would they call her directly? Or would they send an email? Would they tell her specifically what concerns they had? Or would they just decline to move forward? Would she try to figure out who had provided the information? The answer to that last question came sooner than I expected. At 4:30, my phone rang. Tessa's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering, but avoiding the conversation would only delay the inevitable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Zara." Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay, did you talk to anyone about my Stellar Models application?" My heart started racing, but I kept my voice calm. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you tell anyone about it, or share any information about me with anyone who might contact them?" I could lie. I could claim ignorance and force her to accuse me direct. But something about the moment made me choose honesty instead. "Yes," I said simply. The silence on the other end was deafening. When Tessa finally spoke again, her voice was barely controlled rage. "What did you do?" "I provided them with publicly available information about your social media presence and lifestyle choices, information that they should have access to when making decisions about who represents their brand." "You sabotaged me." The words came out like a hit. "You actually sabotaged my career because you're bitter about a fucking Instagram story." "I didn't sabotage anything, Tessa. I gave them the same information that anyone could find if they looked carefully at your online presence. If that ruins your chances, it's because your actual behavior doesn't align with what they're looking for." "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "This was my shot, Zara. My one real shot at making something of myself, and you destroyed it because you can't take a joke." The irony of her words hit me like a physical blow. She was accusing me of destroying her shot at making something of herself, when she'd spent years undermining my attempts to do exactly that. She was calling my public humiliation a joke while treating her own professional consequences like a tragedy. It wasn't a joke, Tessa, and this isn't about revenge. This is about authenticity. You've built your entire online presence on pretending to be someone you're not, and now you're angry that someone noticed. "I'm not pretending to be anyone. I'm a model, Zara. This is my job. Creating aspirational content is literally what models do." Aspirational content isn't the same thing as lying about your lifestyle and mocking other people's genuine efforts to improve themselves. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted from rage to something colder and more calculating. "You know what this is really about. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me, and the second you lose a little weight, you think you can tear me down to build yourself up. But guess what, Zara? You're still the same insecure little sister you've always been. You'll always be in my shadow, and now everyone's going to know exactly how pathetic and vindictive you really are." The words were designed to hurt, and they did, but they also clarified something for me. This was exactly who Tessa was when she couldn't control the narrative. This was who she'd always been, and I'd just been too desperate for her approval to see it clearly. "I'm hanging up now," I said quietly. "Don't you dare hang up on me. We're not done talking about this." "Yes, we are." I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. Then I sat at my desk, hands shaking slightly, and realized that I'd just fundamentally altered the relationship with my sister. There would be no going back to the way things were, no pretending that we were just normal siblings with normal conflict. But for the first time in my life I was okay with that. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Kyle, messaging me from his phone. "What you did to Tessa is fucking disgusting. Family doesn't destroy family like this. You should be ashamed of yourself." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Kyle's opinion of my choices mattered exactly as much as his opinion of my weight loss journey had, which was to say, not at all. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. I kept expecting my phone to ring, kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but nothing happened. I finished my work, gathered my things, and drove home in silence. When I walked into the apartment, Tessa was sitting on the couch with her laptop open, surrounded by tissues and empty wine glass. She looked up when I entered, and I could see that she'd been crying. "They withdrew the offer," she said, her voice hollow. I set my bag down by the door, but didn't move any closer. "I'm sorry you're disappointed." "You're sorry I'm disappointed," she laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "You destroyed my career, and you're sorry I'm disappointed." "Tessa, if your career can be destroyed by people knowing the truth about your behavior, then maybe the problem isn't with the people telling the truth." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to process this version of me, this sister, who wasn't backing down, or apologizing, or trying to make her feel better. "I don't understand what happened to you," she said finally. "You used to be so sweet. You used to care about family." "I still care about family. I just realized that caring about family doesn't mean letting family members treat me like garbage without consequences." "Treat you like garbage? Zara, I've supported you through everything. I've been encouraging about your fitness journey. I've celebrated your progress. You posted my before and after photos to mock me publicly. You refused to take them down when I asked. You told Kyle that my weight loss was cute, but ultimately inadequate compared to your natural beauty. You've spent years making me feel like my accomplishments don't matter because they'll never measure up to your genetics." Each statement landed like a physical blow. I could see Tessa trying to formulate responses, trying to reframe each incident as something other than what it actually was. "That's not, I didn't mean," she started, then stopped. "You were listening to my private conversations. I was in my room. You were talking loud enough for the neighbors to hear." She fell silent then, perhaps realizing that she couldn't deny what she'd said, or explain it away as a misunderstanding. "So what now?" she asked, eventually. "You've gotten your revenge. You've ruined my opportunity. Are you satisfied?" "This was never about revenge, Tess. This was about refusing to let you use my vulnerabilities as entertainment, while hiding behind a fake image of perfection." "And what if I promise to be better? What if I apologize for the Instagram post, and we try to move forward?" I looked at her sitting there, makeup smeared, surrounded by the debris of her disappointment, and felt something I'd never felt before when looking at my sister: pity. Not the condescending kind she'd always shown me, but genuine sadness for someone who'd built their entire identity on external validation, and was now facing the consequences of that choice. "It's too late for promises, Tessa. This isn't about one Instagram post. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been going on for years, and more than that, it's about me finally understanding that I don't need your approval or your apology to feel good about myself." I picked up my bag and headed toward my room, but stopped at the hallway entrance. "For what it's worth, I hope you find something that makes you genuinely happy, but it's not going to be at my expense anymore." That night, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, and ate it while sitting on my bed, laptop open, updating my own social media for the first time in months. I posted a photo from that morning's workout, captioned, simply with the weights I'd lifted, and a note about how strong I was feeling. No transformation comparisons, no inspirational quotes, no performative wellness content, just an honest moment of pride in my progress. The responses were immediate, and overwhelmingly positive. Friends I hadn't heard from in months, commenting about how confident I looked. Workers asking for workout tips. Even some people I barely knew expressing admiration for my consistency and dedication. For the first time I understood the difference between genuine support and the conditional approval I'd been seeking from my family. These people were celebrating my progress because they wanted to see me succeed, not because they needed me to stay small enough to make them feel better about themselves. Around 10 p.m. I heard Tessa's bedroom door close, followed by the sound of muffled phone conversation. Probably calling mom and dad, probably crafting a version of today's events that positioned her as the victim of my inexplicable cruelty. Part of me wondered if I should care about how the family would react, whether they would take her side, whether I would find myself excluded from future gatherings. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the familiar sounds of our shared apartment, I realized that I was no longer afraid of being excluded. I'd been excluding myself for years, shrinking and apologizing and accepting scraps of affection in exchange for staying silent about their treatment of me. Tomorrow there might be angry phone calls from my parents. There might be family drama and taking sides and demands that I apologize for my actions, but tonight, I was proud of myself. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I'd stopped being the victim of someone else's narrative and started writing my own story. And regardless of how it ended, at least it would be true. The call from my mother came at 7:30 the next morning. Before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, I saw her name on the screen, and knew exactly what this was going to be about. Carol Blackwell had clearly received Tessa's version of events, and now it was time for the family cleanup operation. "Zara, we need to talk," she said without preamble. Her voice had that particular tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant I was in trouble and needed to explain myself immediately. "Good morning to you too, Mom. Don't get smart with me. Tessa called me last night in tears, absolutely devastated about what you did to her modeling opportunity. I need to understand what could have possessed you to interfere with your sister's career." I set my coffee cup down and walked to the window, looking out at the morning traffic on the street below. "What exactly did Tessa tell you happened?" "She said you contacted her modeling agency and sabotaged her application out of jealousy and spite. She said you've been acting strange and vindictive ever since you lost some weight, and that you deliberately destroyed her chance at success because you couldn't stand to see her happy." The narrative was so perfectly constructed, so completely devoid of context or personal responsibility, that I almost had to admire its artistry. In Tessa's version, she was the innocent victim of my sudden personality change, rather than someone facing consequences for years of documented cruelty. "Did she mention why I might have contacted the agency?" I asked. "She said, it was because you were upset about some social media post. But Zara, that's no excuse for what you did. Family doesn't destroy family over something so trivial." "Trivial?" I repeated the word slowly, tasting its implications. "Mom, she posted my before and after weight loss photos to mock me publicly, tagged our entire extended family, and refused to take it down when I asked her to. How is that trivial?" There was a pause, and I could hear my mother's mental gears shifting, trying to reconcile this information with the story she'd already accepted. "Well, I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. Tessa has always been supportive of your health journey. Maybe you misunderstood her intention." I didn't misunderstand anything. She captioned the photos with Zara's glow-up attempt. Bless her heart, still working on it. Some of us are just naturally blessed, I guess. How exactly should I have interpreted that? Another pause, longer this time. That does sound unfortunate. But even so, Zara, you don't respond to hurt feelings by ruining someone's career prospects. That's incredibly disproportionate. I didn't ruin anything, Mom. I provided factual information about her social media presence and lifestyle choices to a company that was considering representing her. If that information damages her prospects, it's because her behavior doesn't align with their values, not because I made anything up. But why would you do that? Why would you go out of your way to hurt your own sister? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized that my mother genuinely couldn't understand my actions because she fundamentally didn't see Tessa's behavior as problematic. In her worldview, my public humiliation was a minor incident that I should have absorbed gracefully, while my factual response was a major betrayal that threatened the family dynamic. "I didn't go out of my way to hurt anyone," I said carefully. "I protected myself from someone who was using my vulnerabilities as entertainment. The fact that Tessa happens to be my sister doesn't give her the right to publicly mock my appearance without consequence. Zara, I think you need to seriously consider whether this new attitude of yours is healthy. Ever since you started this fitness obsession, you've become so sensitive, so confrontational. Maybe you should talk to someone about these feelings you're having." The suggestion that my refusal to accept mistreatment was evidence of mental health issues was so perfectly on brand for my family that I almost laughed. In their framework, the problem wasn't Tessa's cruelty, but my unwillingness to silently endure it. I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself, Mom. And I'm not going to pretend that what Tessa did was acceptable just because it makes everyone uncomfortable to acknowledge it. This is exactly what I'm talking about, this defensiveness. This need to be right all the time. It's not like you, Zara. Maybe it is like me. Maybe you just never paid attention before because I was too busy trying to keep everyone else comfortable. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with my mother alternating between guilt trips about family loyalty and suggestions that I seek therapy for my recent behavioral changes. By the time I hung up, I understood that no amount of explanation would make her see the situation from my perspective. She had already decided that I was the problem, and any evidence to the contrary would be dismissed or reframed. The second call came an hour later. Dad. This time his approach characteristically more direct than Mom's psychological maneuvering. Zara, what's this nonsense about you sabotaging your sister's job opportunity? It's not nonsense, Dad, and I didn't sabotage anything. I provided accurate information to a company that was evaluating her as a potential representative. Why the hell would you do something like that? I explained the Instagram incident again, walking him through exactly what Tessa had posted and how she'd responded when I asked her to remove. Dad listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. Well, that was definitely not okay of her to do, he said finally, and for a moment I thought he might actually understand my position. Thank you for acknowledging that, but Zara, you still went too far. You could have handled this within the family instead of involving outsiders. Now you've made it into this big, public thing, and it reflects badly on all of us. And there it was. The acknowledgement that Tessa had behaved badly, followed immediately by the assertion that my response was somehow worse because it had external consequences. In my father's view, family problems should be handled internally, regardless of how one-sided or ineffective that internal handling might be. Dad, I tried to handle it within the family. I asked her to take the post down, and she refused. I explained how it made me feel, and she told me I was being too sensitive. What exactly should I have done differently? You should have let it go. You should have been the bigger person. That's what families do, Zara. They forgive each other and move on. When has Tessa ever been expected to be the bigger person? When has she ever been asked to forgive and move on when someone hurt her feelings? Dad didn't have an answer for that, because we both knew the truth. Tessa's feelings had always been treated as valid and important, while mine had been consistently dismissed as oversensitivity or attention-seeking. The expectation that I be the bigger person was really an expectation that I continue absorbing her cruelty without complaint. Look, kiddo, I know you're upset about the photo thing, and I agree she shouldn't have done that, but this modeling opportunity was really important to her. She's been working toward it for months, and my emotional well-being has been important to me for years, but that didn't stop her from repeatedly undermining it. That's different. And you know it. Career opportunities are concrete things, hurt feelings are temporary. The conversation ended with Dad asking me to think seriously about whether I wanted to permanently damage my relationship with my sister over what he called social media drama. He suggested that I call Tessa to apologize and see if there was any way to fix the situation with the modeling agency. I hung up feeling oddly vindicated. Both conversations had confirmed what I'd suspected. My family was fundamentally invested in maintaining a dynamic where Tessa's comfort and success took precedence over my well-being. They weren't angry because what I'd done was wrong. They were angry because I'd disrupted a system that had been working perfectly well for everyone except me. The third call came that afternoon, but this one wasn't from family. It was from Marcus Sterling at Stellar Mod. Zara, I wanted to follow up with you about the Tessa Blackwell situation, he said. I thought you should know that we've completed our review and decided not to move forward with her application. The documentation you provided was very helpful, but honestly we would have reached the same conclusion through our standard vetting process. The Instagram post mocking your transformation journey was particularly concerning to us. Our brand is built around supporting people's wellness journeys, not ridiculing them. Marcus explained that they'd done a deeper analysis of Tessa's social media presence and found multiple red flags. Beyond the obvious editing and lifestyle inconsistencies, They'd discovered a pattern of negative comments on other people's fitness posts, subtle body shaming disguised as motivation, and what he called performative wellness content that prioritized appearance over genuine health advocacy. "We actually want to thank you for bringing this to our attention," he continued. "It's exactly the kind of information we need to make informed decisions about who represents our brand." "You're welcome. I hope you find someone who better aligns with your values." "Actually, that's another reason I'm calling. We've been following your social media presence since our conversation, and we're impressed by your authentic approach to documenting your fitness journey. Would you be interested in discussing a potential partnership opportunity?" I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry." "What?" "Your transformation story is exactly what we look for in brand ambassadors. Genuine progress, realistic expectations, focus on strength and health rather than just appearance. We'd love to explore whether there might be a collaboration opportunity that makes sense for both of us." The irony was so perfect it was almost surreal. In trying to destroy my sister's opportunity, I'd inadvertently created one for myself. But more than that, I'd attracted interest not by pretending to be someone I wasn't, but by being authentically myself. "I'd be very interested in learning more," I said, trying to keep the amazement out of my voice. "Wonderful. I'll have my assistant send you some information about our ambassador program, and we can schedule a more detailed conversation next week." After I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, processing what had just happened. In the span of 48 hours, I'd gone from being the victim of public humiliation to potentially landing the exact opportunity that my sister had lost because of her own behavior. But the real revelation wasn't about the modeling opportunity. It was about finally understanding the difference between success built on authenticity and success built on deception. Tessa had spent years constructing an image designed to impress others, and when that image was scrutinized, it couldn't withstand examination. I had simply been myself, documented my real journey, and attracted people who valued authenticity over performance. That evening, I called Nina to share the news. "Are you fucking kidding me?" she screamed into the phone. "They want you to be their brand ambassador." "Apparently so." Marcus said they'd been following my social media since our conversation, and were impressed by my approach. "This is the best possible outcome. Not only did you refuse to let Tessa walk all over you, but you ended up getting the opportunity she lost because of her own behavior. It feels almost too perfect. Like karma working overtime." "It's not karma, Zara. It's the natural consequence of being genuine versus being fake. You built something real, and she built something that couldn't survive scrutiny." The modeling agency just recognized the difference. We talked for an hour about the potential partnership and what it might mean for my life. Nina pointed out that this wasn't just about modeling or social media influence. It was about external validation of my transformation from someone who absorbed mistreatment to someone who commanded respect through authenticity. The old Zara would have probably turned down this opportunity because she'd feel guilty about how she got it. Nina observed. "Are you going to do that?" I considered the question seriously. There was definitely a part of me that felt conflicted about benefiting from a situation that had caused Tessa pain, but there was a larger part of me that recognized this as the universe's way of rewarding me for finally choosing myself over my family's dysfunction. "No," I said firmly. "I'm going to pursue it. I earned this opportunity by being authentic and standing up for myself. The fact that it came at Tessa's expense is a consequence of her choices, not." That night I drafted a social media post about the potential partnership, being careful to focus on my gratitude for the opportunity rather than the circumstances that had led to it. I wrote about how unexpected life could be, how doors sometimes opened when you least expected them, and how important it was to stay true to your values even when it felt difficult. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people celebrating my success, sharing their own stories of standing up to family members who undermined their progress, and expressing admiration for my handling of a difficult situation. Many people mentioned that they'd seen my transformation journey and were excited to see me partnering with a brand that valued authenticity. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Coach Riley from Iron Peak Fitness had commented, So proud of you for staying true to yourself and your values. This partnership is well-deserved recognition for the real work you've put in, both physically and emotionally. You've inspired so many people by showing them what authentic transformation looks like. I screenshot that comment and saved it to my phone. It felt like external confirmation of something I was still learning to believe about myself, that my worth wasn't determined by my family's approval or my sister's validation, but by my own integrity and the positive impact I had on others. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Tessa, messaging from a different phone since I'd blocked her main number. I saw your social media post about the modeling opportunity. I can't believe you're actually going to profit from destroying my career. I hope you're happy with yourself. I stared at the message for a long time, considering whether to respond. The old Zara would have immediately called her to explain, to apologize, to try to make her feel better about the situation. The old Zara would have felt guilty about the opportunity and maybe even declined it to preserve family harmony, but I wasn't the old Zara anymore. I was someone who understood that taking responsibility for other people's feelings at the expense of my own well-being wasn't kindness, it was self-destruction. I deleted the message without responding and blocked the new number too. Then I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about Stellar Models' brand values, their previous campaigns, and their ambassador program. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I was going to be the kind of representative they deserved, and the kind of role model I wished I'd had when I was struggling to believe in my own worth. For the first time in my life, I was being rewarded for refusing to shrink myself to make other people comfortable, and I was going to make the most of it. 3 months into my partnership with Stellar Models, I was sitting in Lens and Light Studios for my first major campaign shoot, when I realized how completely my life had transformed. The photographer, a woman named Diana who specialized in authentic lifestyle imagery, was explaining her vision for capturing what she called real strength in real bodies. "The thing about your story, Zara," she said while adjusting the lighting, "is that it's not really about weight loss. It's about finding your voice. That's what makes you different from the typical fitness influencer." She was right. The partnership had evolved into something much more meaningful than I'd initially expected. Rather than just posting workout videos and supplement recommendations, I'd become an advocate for authentic self-transformation. My content focused on the emotional and psychological aspects of change, the importance of setting boundaries with toxic relationships, and the radical act of choosing yourself even when it disappointed others. The response had been extraordinary. My follower count had grown from 3,000 to over 50,000, but more importantly, the engagement was genuine. People shared their own stories of family dysfunction, workplace bullying, and the challenge of maintaining personal growth in the face of others' resistance to change. I'd received hundreds of messages from women who said my story had given them permission to stop shrinking themselves to preserve toxic relationships. During a break in the shoot, I checked my phone and found a message that stopped me cold. It was from my grandmother's neighbor, Miss Patterson, whom I'd met briefly at the funeral 2 years ago. "Dear Zara, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I saw your recent interview in that wellness magazine, and wanted you to know how proud your grandmother would be. She used to tell me about your struggles with your family, and she always said you had the strength to break free when you were ready. She left something for you that I've been holding on to. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime this week?" My hands trembled slightly as I typed back that yes, I would very much like to meet with her. Grandma Helen had been the one person in my family who'd truly seen me, who'd encouraged my independence, and validated my feelings when everyone else dismissed them. The idea that she'd left something specifically for me, something beyond what had been handled in her will, felt like a message from beyond. We met at a small cafe near her old neighborhood, and Mrs. Patterson brought a worn wooden box that I recognized immediately. It had sat on Grandma Helen's kitchen windowsill, filled with recipes and seed packets, and the small treasures she collected during her daily walks. "She gave this to me about 6 months before she passed," Mrs. Patterson explained, sliding the box across the table. "She said to give it to you when you were ready to receive it, and I'd know when that time came." When I saw that magazine interview, where you talked about learning to honor your own worth, I knew it was time. Inside the box was a collection of letters, each one addressed to me and dated over the course of several years. The first one was from when I was 16, struggling with my weight and my place in the family. The handwriting was shakier in the later letters, but the message was consistent. She saw my strength, she believed in my potential, and she understood that my family's treatment of me was not a reflection of my worth. The final letter was dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Zara," it began, "by the time you read this, I hope you've learned what I've always known, that you are not responsible for managing other people's insecurities. Your light doesn't dim anyone else's, unless they choose to see it that way. Shine anyway." She went on to describe watching me navigate family gatherings, seeing how I absorbed criticism and minimized my achievements to keep the peace. She wrote about her own experience as the family member who dared to be different, who'd chosen education over early marriage, and independence over security, and how she'd faced similar resistance from people who felt threatened by her choices. "The hardest lesson," she wrote, "is learning that love without respect is not love at all. It's control disguised as care. Real love celebrates your growth, even when it makes others uncomfortable." The letter included a key to a safety deposit box that contained what she called her freedom fund, money she'd saved specifically to help me establish independence when I was ready. She'd apparently been watching my struggles for years, quietly preparing to support my eventual liberation from the family dynamics that were holding me back. I sat in that cafe reading her words, tears streaming down my face, finally understanding that my recent actions hadn't been out of character at all. They'd been a return to the person she'd always seen in me, the person I'd buried under years of trying to earn approval from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. That evening, I used part of Grandma Helen's inheritance to put a deposit on my own apartment, a one-bedroom place with huge windows and a small balcony where I could grow herbs and watch the sunrise. For the first time in my adult life, I would be living completely alone, answerable only to myself. The conversation with Tessa about my move was brief and cold. She'd barely spoken to me since the Stellar Models situation, communicating only when absolutely necessary, and treating me like a stranger who happened to share her living space. When I told her I was moving out, she simply nodded and asked when I'd be taking my furniture. "Most of it was mine anyway," she added with a shrug, as if our entire shared history could be reduced to a dispute over household items. I realized then that this was who she'd always been. The sister I'd thought I'd lost had never actually existed. I'd created a fantasy version of her based on brief moments of kindness that were always followed by longer periods of subtle cruelty. The real Tessa was someone who could publicly humiliate me, and then act surprised when there were consequences, someone who could watch me move out of our shared life with complete indifference. The moving process was surprisingly therapeutic. As I packed my belongings, I found myself sorting through not just physical items, but emotional ones as well. Photos from family vacations where I'd been cropped out of later posts, gifts from relatives that came with backhanded comments about my appearance or lifestyle, cards from birthdays where my achievements were mentioned briefly before the conversation moved on to Tessa's latest modeling aspirations. I kept very little of it. Most of the items that connected me to my family's version of my story went into donation bags. What I kept were things that reflected my own journey, books that had inspired me, workout gear that had supported my transformation, certificates from professional achievements that no one had bothered to celebrate. My new apartment felt like a sanctuary from the moment I walked in with my first box. The silence wasn't empty or lonely, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I could exist without constantly calculating how my presence affected other people's moods or modifying my behavior to avoid conflict. The Stellar Models partnership continued to flourish. I'd been featured in 2 major campaigns and was scheduled to speak at a wellness conference about authentic transformation. The brand had connected me with other ambassadors who shared similar stories of overcoming toxic family dynamics, and I'd found a community of people who understood that sometimes loving yourself means disappointing others. One of those connections led to an unexpected opportunity. Sarah, another Stellar Models ambassador who'd left an abusive marriage to pursue her fitness goals, mentioned that she was launching a nonprofit organization focused on helping women build economic independence after leaving toxic relationships. She asked if I'd be interested in serving on the board, contributing both my marketing expertise and my personal experience. We need people who understand that transformation isn't just about changing your body, she explained during our coffee meeting. It's about changing your entire relationship with yourself and your boundaries. I accepted immediately. The work felt like a natural extension of everything I'd learned over the past year, a way to use my platform and skills to help other women navigate their own journeys toward authentic self-worth. 6 months after moving into my own place, I received an unexpected visit. Mom showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said after I'd reluctantly let her in, "about the Instagram situation, and everything that happened after." I made coffee while she sat uncomfortably on my couch, clearly struggling with whatever she'd come to say. "Your father and I have been having some difficult conversations about how we handled things," she continued, "about whether we've been fair to you over the year." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from her, and part of me wanted to grab onto it to use it as a foundation for rebuilding our relationship. But I'd learned too much about the difference between genuine accountability and performative gesture. "What brought this on?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Tessa's been struggling since the modeling thing fell through. She's gained more weight, she's been drinking too much, and she's been saying some very concerning things about you and about herself." Mom paused, looking down at her hand. "Last week, she told me that she's always felt like she had to be perfect because the family needed at least one success story. She said she felt like she couldn't afford to have problems because you were already the difficult one." The revelation hung in the air between us. Mom was finally seeing that the family dynamic she'd helped create had been toxic for both of us, just in different ways. Tessa had been trapped by the pressure to be the golden child just as surely as I'd been diminished by being cast as the problem child. "I'm sorry that Tessa is struggling," I said carefully, "but I'm not responsible for fixing her relationship with herself or with the family. I know that. I think I'm finally starting to understand that we put too much pressure on both of you to fulfill roles that weren't fair to either of you." We talked for another hour, and while I appreciated her willingness to examine the family patterns, I also recognized that this conversation was happening only because the system had finally stopped working for everyone. If Tessa had successfully transitioned into a modeling career, if I had continued quietly absorbing mistreatment, Mom would never have questioned the dynamics that had seemed to benefit the family as a whole. "I'd like to try to rebuild our relationship," she said, as she was leaving. "But I understand if you need time to think about what that would look like." "I do need time," I agreed, "and I need any relationship we have going forward to be based on who I actually am, not who you need me to be for the family to function." She nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Like many people who'd built their identity around managing other people's emotions, she wasn't entirely sure who she was when she wasn't playing that role. A year after the Instagram incident that had started everything, I was invited to give a keynote speech at a women's wellness conference. The topic was authentic transformation, growing beyond others' expectations, and as I stood at the podium looking out at an audience of 600 women, I felt the full weight of how far I'd traveled. I told them about the before photo, about the public humiliation, about the moment I'd decided to stop protecting other people's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. I talked about the difference between transformation that seeks external approval and transformation that honors internal truth. I shared Grandma Helen's letters and the importance of having at least one person who sees your authentic self, even if that person is ultimately yourself. But mostly, I talked about the radical act of believing that you deserve respect, even from people who claim to love you, especially from people who claim to love you. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes, but the real reward was the line of women who waited afterward to share their own story. Women who'd left abusive marriages, set boundaries with toxic family members, changed careers despite others' disapproval, and chosen authenticity over acceptance. Each conversation reminded me that my story wasn't unique in its pain, but it was powerful in its resolution. I'd proven that it was possible to transform not just your body but your entire relationship with self-worth, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable others' dysfunction. As I drove home that night, I passed the old apartment building where Tessa and I had lived together. I felt a moment of sadness for the relationship we'd never actually had, but it was the clean sadness of grief, rather than the complicated ache of ongoing abuse. I'd learned that you can't love someone into treating you better, and you can't shrink yourself enough to avoid their insecurity, but you can choose to build a life that honors your worth, surround yourself with people who celebrate your growth, and use your story to help others find their own path to authentic self-love. That night, I wrote in the journal that had become my practice since reading Grandma Helen's letters. Today I spoke my truth to 600 strangers, and felt more at home than I ever did trying to be acceptable to my family. This is what it means to come home to yourself. The next morning, I woke up in my sunny apartment, made coffee in my peaceful kitchen, and checked my social media to find hundreds of messages from women thanking me for showing them that transformation was possible. Not the kind that changes you to please others, but the kind that reveals who you've always been underneath the fear of disappointing people who were never really on your side anyway. I'd finally learned the difference between being loved and being controlled, between family loyalty and family dysfunction, between supporting others and enabling their worst impulses. And in learning those differences, I'd discovered something more valuable than any external approval: the unshakable knowledge that I was worth protecting, worth celebrating, and worth the radical act of choosing myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.